Okay, this is the second part of the lecture from the theme English as a language of instruction. And here we talk about English as a lingua franca. The English language used as a language of instruction in higher education should be understood by all participants, without any of the participants necessarily having English as their first language. English as a lingua franca is a separate area of research in the education sector. The fact that only 1 in 4 English speakers has English as their first language. Crystal has led many to react to the dichotomy between native and non-native speakers that's often referred to in language teaching. Many argue that the native norm is a standard to be followed and that one should always strive to speak and use the language like a native. The counter-reaction is a growing number of people who point out that there are many varieties of English and that these are just correct as the native varieties, usually British or American English. Jenkins provides an overview of the research that has been conducted in ELF. Among other things, pronunciation in different parts of the world, oral academic ELF and how ELF is used in practice have been studied. Seidelhofer shows typical errors that non-native speakers of English make without losing understanding. These errors include the lack of third person, for example, the endings S for verbs in the present tense. For example, she helped me with the shopping. It includes confusion between relative pronouns who and which, and omission of the obligatory definite and indefinite articles. Since communication flows, Seidelhofer believes that such grammatical errors can be tolerated. What seems to create communication problems, however, is when a non-native speaker uses expressions and metaphors from his own language in direct translation into English. Seidelhofer and Jenkins believes that research results such as these should play an important role in the teaching of English as a second language. They are important as a reaction against what Philipson has called linguistic imperialism, by which he means, Robert Philipson means that there is a conscious effort to ensure that British and American English are the only prevailing and accepted varieties in academic context. Björkman investigated how ELF is used orally in engineering education and concluded that language was ungrammatical and contained errors. Despite this, the speaker's ability to compensate for this was crucial for communication to function. Compensatory strategies include self-correction, the use of repetition, and the previously used words and expressions, and signaling that something is significant. Bergman believes that such strategies are important to include in second language teaching. Much of this research that had been conducted on ELF concerns oral interaction. There seems to be a good consensus that non-native speakers should feel that they can express themselves in English despite any linguistic deficiencies. However, when it comes to written language, the situation is different, especially in higher education, and there's a presentation of research results. Here, the native norm still applies. During a symposium at the AILA, World Congress in 2014, a number of journal editors gave their views on linguistic correctness. The majority of them stated that the language of the articles should be correct and in accordance with the accepted standard language. The only one who said he accepted ELF norms is the articles in her journal was the only person, it was Barbara Sedelhofer. She is editor of a journal with a very name English as Lingua, Franca. The difference between spoken and written English is important to remember, so that we focus on a language that is correct. Let's now go over to and talk about English as a subject, the subject didactic of English for prospective English teachers. In their book, Subject Didactics, An Art of Teaching, the authors Brones and Renebo describe subject didactics as the art of teaching, and then go into detail about what the art form of didactics entail. The well-known Norwegian subject didactic expert Ongstad presents the Agde definition of subject didactics. Subject didactics are reflections on what a subject is in relation to what it can be in school or should be in school, society, academia, and teacher education. Subject didactics are the knowledge and skills that make this reflection qualified and professional in terms of the subject and are present in our subject-related practices and are able to develop the subject. Subject didactics is largely concerned with the relationship between the theory and practice of the subject, and it seeks to develop the subject theory of practice and its social function. Subject didactics has pronounced subject critical element, subject critical and the society critical element, and aims to develop competence for change through research and teaching. Well, that's what we mean the subject didactic. The general study object of subject didactics is to identify, describe, and to understand the processes that constitute teaching and learning in the subject. Subject didactics includes meta-theoretical reflection on the practical and theoretical prerequisites of the subject. As regards the subject didactics conditions for English, the conditions mainly consist of the curriculum in English for primary, and the secondary schools. In Swedish, it's called Lgr 2011, the last one, and GE 2011 for upper secondary school, as well as research practice in English linguistics and English literary studies. For primary and secondary schools, the curriculum specifies that teaching in the subject English should provide students with the conditions to develop knowledge and skills, such as understanding of spoken and written English, and the ability to interpret the content, ability to formulate and communicate in English in speech and writing, ability to use linguistic strategies in different contexts, ability to adapt language to different purposes, recipients and situations, ability to discuss and reflect on living conditions, social issues, and cultural phenomena in different contexts and parts of the world where English is used. From Ongstan's definition of subject didactics it's clear that the term includes making the subject of meta-reflection, a concept that's far from self-evident. Subjects, courses, and programs change over time, as you know, and teacher education looks different today compared to before. The school subject English is something different from the teacher education subject. Even the academic subject is affected by the purpose for which it's studied. The teacher needs to understand how the subject changes over time and by the educational context. In the next step of the definition, subject didactics is raised as qualified reflection. Yes, qualified reflection. Subject didactics aims to develop knowledge about learning subject knowledge, as well as for teacher education, about practical teaching methodology. What characterizes professional reflection is that there is a relationship between theoretical knowledge and practical skills. Finally, Ongstad emphasizes the anchoring of subject didactics. The subject discipline and program are influenced by society's resources, goals, expectations, and needs. Developing subject didactics competence means underpinning the learner's ability to act democratically, critically, and independently. We believe that subject didactics can be understood from a question of subject identity and from a question of subject practice. With the first approach of subject identity, subject didactics becomes synonymous with knowledge of teaching situations in the subject. In the second view, subject didactics means understanding how the subject is actually taught. The latter includes concrete classroom teaching, but this aspect is only one part of subject didactics, which also includes more than knowledge of how the subject can be translated into concrete teaching. The subject-based understanding of the concept forms the basis for our description of subject didactic knowledge among prospective English teachers. Well, what is English didactic? The school subject English is composed of two distinct scientific areas: English linguistics and English literary studies. The school subject also contains elements of subjects such as history and social science. English didactics is more complex and, in a sense, more divergent than is the case in subject didactics. The situation is comparable with other modern languages, but particularly noticeable since Swedish students, for example, Swedish students' prior knowledge of English is generally greater than in other foreign languages. This means that the literary studies part of the subject is a prerequisite for literary studies competence. Since the research base of the English subject consists of linguistics and literary studies, it's natural that the subject progression and the specifically subject didactic progression are described with this subject as a base. Subject didactics presupposes knowledge of linguistic and literary studies research practices. Subject competence is possessed by the person who can perform the task faced by English teachers. Subject competence requires basic skills in both English linguistics and English literary studies, as well as the ability to translate these skills into teaching, like transfer them into teaching. In addition, knowledge of how the practical implementation of the English subject is regulated via governing documents is needed. The complex nature of subject didactic knowledge requires that students develop several pieces of knowledge. Schulman distinguishes three specific pedagogical teacher competences. They are general subject knowledge, we call it propositional knowledge. Specific subject knowledge, we call them case knowledge. That's knowledge of descriptions through which general subject knowledge can be made concrete. And strategic subject knowledge, as we call them short strategic knowledge, or knowledge of how to actualize specific subject knowledge on the basis of general pedagogical principles. To describe the latter, Schulman suggests the term pedagogical content knowledge. Ultimately, English didactics aims for the students, the future teacher in our case, to be able to answer the following questions in teaching situation. The first question is, what is being taught? What is the learning object? The second question is, how is the teaching done? Like, what is the method? And the third one, why is this being taught? What is the goal? And the fourth question is, who is being taught? What is the target group? It's a reasonable expectation that prospective teachers will acquire the knowledge and skills required to answer the above mentioned questions. According to the new Education Act of Sweden, Chapter 1, 5th paragraph, the answers to the questions must be based on scientific evidence. Student teachers of English are expected to adopt a reflective approach to their teaching, which in turn is expected to be thoroughly plan it based on the teaching group and in accordance with current guidance documents. Evaluation of their own teaching must also take place continuously and systematically. The fact that English is today's lingua franca affects English didactic. Of course, English teachers must relate to this fact, as well as to the fact that English occurs as a natural feature in the everyday lives of the vast majority of students. English didactic competence includes an ability to bridge the gap between English outside and in school, as well as to take into account the status of English as a world language. I will describe how the progression of subject didactic knowledge can look like in higher education. I will focus on primary and secondary school teachers of English and describe the subject didactic progression from A level in the first semester to C level in the third semester. I will describe the levels by first giving examples of progression within the linguistic specialization, followed by the literary sciences specialization. And and then we'll describe aspects of progression that are common to both specializations, followed by examples of course content, aims, and objectives for A, B, and C levels respectively. So next and final part of this lecture, the third video, is on the subject didactic progression from A to C level.